My name is Daniel Harper, and I used to think I had it all figured out. A steady job as a software engineer, a house in the suburbs of Raleigh with a wraparound porch, and a wife who turned heads wherever she went. Emily. My Emily. She had this laugh, soft, like wind chimes on a summer evening, that could pull me out of the darkest coding spirals. We'd been married 7 years, together for 10, and I thought I knew every inch of her, inside and out. Turns out, I didn't know a damn thing. It started with a mirror. Not a metaphor, an actual mirror, the one in our upstairs bathroom, framed in brushed nickel, the kind she'd begged me to install because it tied the room together. I was shaving one morning last spring, razor gliding over my jaw, when I noticed it, a hairline crack running diagonally from the top left corner. Barely visible unless the light hit it just right. But there it was, a fracture I couldn't unsee. I asked Emily about it over breakfast. Did you bump into the mirror or something? I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. She was at the stove, flipping pancakes, her auburn hair tied up in a messy bun. No idea, she replied, not looking at me. Maybe it's just old. Her voice was casual, but there was this tiny hitch, like she'd rehearsed the line and forgotten the inflection. I let it go. Mirrors crack. Houses settle. Life moves on. Except it didn't. That crack stuck with me, nagging like a splinter under a fingernail. I started noticing other things. Small things, at first. Her phone, always face down on the counter now, when it used to sit screen up, buzzing with texts from her sister or her book club. The way she'd linger in the driveway after work, staring at nothing, before coming inside. How she'd stopped wearing the perfume I bought her, some floral thing she used to love, and started smelling like something sharper, muskier, unfamiliar. I told myself I was paranoid. Work had been brutal, endless deadlines, a new project manager who didn't know code from a cookbook, and I was probably projecting stress onto her. Emily was a paralegal at a law firm downtown, always juggling late nights and needy clients. She'd earned a little distance, hadn't she? 10 years together, you're allowed to drift a bit, orbit each other instead of colliding every day. That's what I told myself. Then came the night of the fundraiser. Her firm hosted it every May, some glitzy thing at the Raleigh Convention Center to raise money for legal aid. Black tie, overpriced wine, the works. I hated those events, too many handshakes, too much small talk, but Emily thrived there. She'd glide through the room in a dress that hugged her like a second skin, all confidence and charm. This time, though, she didn't push me to go. Stay home, Dan, she'd said, slipping on her heels. You've been wiped out lately. I'll be fine solo. She kissed my forehead, quick and light, and was out the door before I could argue. I should have gone. God, I should have gone. I stayed up, scrolling through Netflix, waiting for her. Midnight came and went. At 1 a.m., I texted her. You okay? No reply. At 2, I called. Straight to voicemail. By 3, I was pacing the living room, that cracked mirror flashing in my mind like a warning sign I'd ignored. She stumbled in at 4:17. I remember the exact time because the clock on the mantel seemed to scream it at me. Her dress was wrinkled, her lipstick smudged, and that musky scent hit me like a punch. Sorry, she mumbled, kicking off her shoes. Drinks ran late. Lost track. Where's your phone? I asked, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. Dead, she said, tossing her purse on the couch. I'll charge it tomorrow. She climbed the stairs without looking back, leaving me standing there, the air thick with something I couldn't name. The next morning, I checked her phone while she showered. I'm not proud of it, but that crack in the mirror had spread to my head, splintering my trust into shards. It wasn't dead, full battery, notifications off. I swiped it open. Her passcode was our anniversary, 0527, sentimental and predictable. No text from her sister or book club. Just a single message from a number not saved in her contacts. You were incredible tonight. Same time next week? No name, no context, but my stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a cliff. I didn't confront her. Not then. I put the phone back, watched her come downstairs in her robe, humming like nothing was wrong, and I smiled through breakfast while my mind screamed. Who was she meeting? What had she done? I needed proof, something concrete, not just a text that could mean anything. So I waited. I watched. And the more I saw, the less I recognized the woman I'd married. It was a Tuesday when I followed her for the first time. She'd said she was working late, but I called her office casual, just checking in, and the receptionist said she'd left at 5. I drove to the parking lot across from her building, saw her silver Camry pull out, and tailed her at a distance. She didn't go home. She turned onto I-40, then exited near Cary, pulling into the lot of a boutique hotel called the Laurel. I parked across the street, watched her step out in a dress I didn't recognize, red, bold, nothing like the muted tones she wore to work. A man met her at the entrance. Tall, dark hair, suit too sharp for a paralegal's salary. They didn't touch, not out in the open, but the way he looked at her, it was like he owned her. I sat there for 2 hours, hands shaking on the steering wheel, until they came out together. Her hair was mussed, his tie loose. They parted with a nod, no kiss, no lingering, like pros at this game. I drove home before she did, beat her by 10 minutes, and was on the couch with a beer when she walked in. Rough day? I asked, voice steady as stone. Yeah, she said, avoiding my eyes. Client stuff. You know how it is. I nodded. I knew how it was. That night, I lay awake next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering how long she'd been lying to me. Months? Years? The crack in the mirror wasn't just glass anymore. It was us, splitting apart, and I'd been too blind to see it. But now I saw, and I wasn't going to let it in quietly. Emily had her secrets, but I had something too. Time. Time to dig, to plan, to turn this into a reckoning she'd never see coming. My name is Daniel Harper, and I've learned that betrayal doesn't hit you all at once. It's not a lightning bolt or a gunshot. It's a slow bleed, a drip you don't notice until you're dizzy from the loss. After that night at the Laurel, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Emily lay beside me, her breath soft and even, oblivious to the storm tearing through my head. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the last 10 years, searching for the crack I'd missed. When had she stopped being mine? Or had she ever truly been? The next morning, I called in sick. First time in years. My boss, Greg, didn't buy it. Heard it in his grunt over the phone, but I didn't care. I needed time, space to think, to hunt. Emily left for work at 7:45, same as always, her heels clicking on the hardwood like nothing had changed. I waited 10 minutes, then tore through the house like a man possessed. Drawers, closets, her side of the bathroom vanity, anything that might hold a piece of her I didn't know. I found it in the guest room, of all places. A shoebox shoved under the bed, buried beneath a pile of old quilts she'd inherited from her mom. Inside, a burner phone, cheap and black, the kind you buy at a gas station. My hand shook as I powered it on. No passcode, arrogant or sloppy, I couldn't decide. The call log was empty, wiped clean, but the texts weren't. Dozens of them, all from one number, no name attached. Meet me at 7. Where the red? Missed you last night. He doesn't suspect a thing, does he? That one stopped me cold. My chest tightened, a vice squeezing my ribs. I scrolled further. You're my escape, M. M. Not Emily. Not my Emily, just M, like she belonged to someone else. I wanted to smash the phone, grind it into dust under my boot, but I didn't. Evidence. I needed more. I photographed every message, every timestamp, then put it back exactly as I'd found it. The man in the suit, Mr. Tall, dark, and expensive, he was real, not a paranoid delusion. And Emily was playing me like a fiddle, humming her way through breakfast while texting him under the table. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Rage was there, sure, clawing at my throat, but something colder took over strategy. If she could lie, so could I. If she could sneak, I'd outsneak her. I'd spent a decade building software, finding bugs, tracing patterns. She was a puzzle now, and I'd crack her wide open. That afternoon, I tracked the number. A quick search online showed it was a prepaid line, untraceable without more muscle than I had. Fine. I'd go analog. I drove back to the Laurel, parked in the same spot across the street, and watched. It was a Wednesday. No reason for her to be there, but I needed to know the place, its exits, its blind spots. The lobby was all glass and chrome, too exposed for secrets, which meant they were meeting upstairs. I walked in, casual as you please, and chatted up the desk clerk, a kid named Tyler, acne-scarred and bored. Slipped him $20 and a story about a lost wallet from last night. He didn't care enough to check the logs, just handed me a spare key card for room 312. That's where the regulars go, he said with a smirk. I pocketed it and left before he asked questions. Room 312 smelled like her. Not just the musky scent I'd caught on her dress, but her shampoo, her skin. The bed was made, but the pillows were off-center, like someone had sat there too long. I found a hair on the carpet, auburn and curling, a match for hers. My stomach churned, but I kept moving to check the trash, the drawers, the bathroom. Nothing concrete, just echoes of her presence. Then, Under the nightstand, a glint caught my eye. A cufflink, silver, engraved with a cursive J. Not mine. I'd never owned anything that fancy. I bagged it in a tissue and tucked it away. J, a crumb, but it was something. Back home, I started digging into her life. Her laptop was a fortress, new password, no more anniversary code, but her work email wasn't. She'd left it open on our shared desktop once, months ago, and I'd saved the login. I skimmed through, searching for a J. Nothing obvious, just case files and client names, until I hit an email from a Jonathan Pierce, ESQ subject. Follow-up on Thompson case. Dry stuff, procedural, but the signature caught me. Looking forward to our next meeting, M. There it was again, M. My pulse hammered. Jonathan Pierce. I Googled him. Senior partner at her firm, mid-40s, chiseled jaw, the kind of guy who golfed with judges. His photo matched the man from The Laurel, suit and all. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I kept following her. Thursday night, she said she had a team dinner. I trailed her to a wine bar downtown, watched through the window as she sat across from him, Jonathan, laughing, her hand brushing his over the table. Friday, she worked late, again, and I followed her back to The Laurel. Same routine. Red dress, him waiting 2 hours behind closed doors. Each night, she came home with a smile and a lie, and I swallowed it, letting her think I was still the clueless husband sipping beer on the couch. But I wasn't clueless anymore. I was a ghost in my own life, haunting her every move. And then came the twist I didn't see coming. It was Saturday, a rare day she didn't have an excuse to vanish. We were in the kitchen, her chopping vegetables, me pretending to read the paper, when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your mailbox. I froze. Emily didn't notice, too busy dicing carrots. I stepped outside, heart pounding, and opened the box. Inside was a manila envelope, no address, just my name in block letters. I tore it open. Photos grainy, but clear enough. Emily and Jonathan, tangled in each other at the Laurel. Timestamped from last week. And a note, handwritten, she's not the only one with secrets. Ask her about Chicago. Chicago? We'd never been there together. She'd gone once, 2 years ago, for a legal conference. Said it was boring, all seminars and stale coffee. I'd believed her. Why wouldn't I? But now, that crack in the mirror split wider. I stuffed the envelope in my jacket and went back inside, mind racing. Who sent this? Why? Was it Jonathan? Taunting me? Someone else? That night, I tested her. Hey, I said, casual as I could manage, remember that trip you took to Chicago? What was that conference about again? She was on the couch, scrolling her phone, and for a split second, her fingers stopped. Her eyes flicked to me, then away. Oh, just some law stuff, she said, voice too light. Contracts, I think. Why? No reason, I lied. Just popped into my head. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. And that's when I knew Chicago wasn't a conference. It was something else, something bigger. The photos, the note, Jonathan, the cufflink, they were pieces, but not the whole picture. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was hiding a life I'd never touched. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat in the dark, envelope in my lap, plotting my next move. Confrontation was coming. I could feel it like a storm on the horizon, but not yet. I needed the truth, all of it, and I'd tear her world apart to get it. She thought she was winning this game. She had no idea I just started playing. My name is Daniel Harper, and I've learned that truth isn't a gift. It's a blade, sharp and cold, and it cuts deepest when you're not ready. By the time that envelope landed in my mailbox, I thought I'd seen the worst of Emily's lies. Jonathan Pierce, the Laurel, the burner phone, they were ugly, sure, but they fit a pattern I could grasp. An affair, a midlife fling, a betrayal I could name. Then came Chicago, and the ground under me turned to quicksand. Sunday morning, Emily was all sunshine, pancakes again, humming some tune I didn't recognize, acting like we were still the couple in the framed photo on the mantel. I played along, sipping coffee, nodding at her chatter about work, but my mind was elsewhere. That note, ask her about Chicago, burned a hole in my jacket pocket. Who knew? Who cared enough to tip me off? I needed answers, but confronting her blind was a risk. She'd lie again, spin a story, and I'd be left chasing shadows. No. I had to dig deeper, find the source. I started with Jonathan. If Chicago was a secret, he might be part of it, maybe the key. Monday, I took another sick day, drove to his office downtown, a glass tower that screamed money and power. I didn't go in too obvious, but I parked across the street and waited. He emerged at noon, sharp in a navy suit, heading to a deli 2 blocks over. I followed on foot, keeping my distance. He met a guy there, short, balding, nervous energy, handed him an envelope, clapped him on the shoulder, and left. The guy stayed, nursing a sandwich, so I slid into the booth across from him. Mind if I sit? I asked, not waiting for an answer. He blinked, mouth full, then nodded. I leaned in, voice low. You know Jonathan Pierce? He swallowed hard, eyes darting. Yeah. Why? Saw you with him. I'm looking into something. Help me out, and I'll owe you. I slid a 50 across the table. Cheap, but it worked. He pocketed it, glancing around. He's my lawyer. Handles my divorce. That's it. Divorce. I pressed. He ever mentioned Chicago? The guy frowned, then shook his head. No. Just Raleigh stuff. He's big on discretion, though always says keep it quiet, keep it clean. Look, I don't know much. He's intense, that's all. Intense. Discreet. Not enough, but a start. I left the deli, mind spinning. Jonathan wasn't just her lover, he was a player, someone who covered tracks. Chicago might not be his secret, but Emily's? I had to go back to her world. That night, she worked late again. I didn't follow, I hacked instead. Her work email was still open on the desktop, and I dove in, searching for Chicago. Buried in a thread from 2 years ago, I found it, an itinerary. Legal Conference, Chicago, May 12 to 15, 2022. Hotel, The Drake. No mention of Jonathan, but the dates lined up with her trip. I cross-checked her firm's public calendar, nothing about a conference that week. She'd lied. I booked a flight for the next day. If Chicago held answers, I'd find them myself. The Drake was old money, marble floors, chandeliers, a hum of quiet wealth. I checked in under a fake name, paid cash, and started asking questions. The concierge, a woman named Carla with a tight smile, remembered Emily when I showed her a photo. Oh, her, she said, eyes narrowing. Came through a couple years back. Not for a conference, though. She was with a guy. Tall, dark hair. They kept to themselves. Jonathan Pierce? I asked, showing his picture. Carla shook her head. No, different guy. Younger, maybe. Looked like trouble, tattoos, leather jacket. She seemed nervous. Not Jonathan. A third player. My head spun. I pressed her for more, slipped her 100. She leaned in. They argued in the bar one night. Loud. She stormed out, he followed. Next day, they were gone. That's all I've got. Tattoos. Leather. Trouble. None of it fit the Emily I knew, polished, poised, paralegal perfect. I thanked Carla, headed to the bar, and dug online. Chicago News Archives, May 2022. Half an hour later, I found it. A blurb in the Tribune. Local man found dead in alley near the Drake, May 14, 2022. Suspected overdose. Name, Michael Mikey Russo, 29. The photo was grainy, but the tattoos, snakes curling up his neck, matched Carla's description. No mention of Emily, no suspects, just a dead end. Or was it? I flew back that night, mind racing. Emily with a tattooed stranger, arguing, him dead the next day. Coincidence? Or something darker? I got home before her, stashed my evidence, the photos, the cufflink, the note, and waited. She walked in at 10, tired, but smiling. Hey, you're up, she said, dropping her bag. Yeah, I replied, forcing a grin. Thought I'd wait for you. How was work? Busy, she said, too quick. You know, usual chaos. I nodded, watching her climb the stairs. Chaos. Sure. But now I had a name, Mikey Russo, and a death tied to her. I couldn't ask her yet, not without tipping my hand. Instead, I called an old college buddy, Nate, who'd gone private investigator after flunking out of law school. Tuesday morning, we met at a diner off I-40. I laid it all out. Emily, Jonathan, Chicago, Mikey. He whistled low. Dan, this ain't just infidelity, he said, scribbling notes. You're poking a bear. If she's mixed up in a death accidental or not, you need proof, not guesses. I'll dig into Russo, see what I can pull. Give me a week. A week felt like forever, but I agreed. That night, the game changed again. Emily was in the shower when her burner phone buzzed, still under the guest bed where I'd left it. I checked it. A new text, same number as before. He's asking questions. We need to move faster. My blood ran cold. She knew I was on to her, or someone did. Jonathan? The mysterious sender? I put the phone back, hard hammering, and pretended to sleep when she came to bed. Wednesday, I upped the stakes. I planted a GPS tracker in her Camry, bought it online, stuck it under the wheel well. She left at noon, claiming a client lunch, and I followed the signal. Not the Laurel this time, further out, a warehouse off Route 70. I parked a block away, watched her pull up. Jonathan was there, but so was someone else, a woman, blonde, late 30s, in a black SUV. They talked, tense, Emily gesturing wildly. The blonde handed her a duffel bag, then drove off. Emily and Jonathan climbed into his car, sped away. I tailed into a storage unit in Durham, watched them unload the bag, something heavy, clanking, then lock up and leave. I broke in that night. Crowbar, flashlight, no plan, just desperation. Inside the unit, cash, stacks of it, and a gun. A freaking gun. My hand shook as I snapped photos, mind reeling. Affair? Sure. But this? This was crime, big, messy, beyond anything I'd imagined. Who was Emily? Really? Back home, I hid the pics, waited for Nate's call. It came Thursday. Mikey Russo, he said, voice grim. Small-time dealer, Chicago native. Died of an overdose, but the coroner's report's fishy, needle marks didn't match his usual pattern. Cops dropped it, no leads. And get this, he had a girlfriend back then. Auburn hair, paralegal from out of town. Sound familiar? Emily. My Emily, tied to a dead man, a gun, a bag of cash. I thanked Nate, hung up, and stared at the cracked mirror in the bathroom. It wasn't just broken, it was shattered, like me. She'd be home soon, smiling, lying. But now I had leverage. The question was, who'd break first? My name is Daniel Harper, and I once thought I could outsmart the chaos Emily had dragged into our lives. I was wrong. By Thursday night, I'd seen too much: cash, a gun, a dead man in Chicago, and my wife at the center of it all. The woman I'd loved for a decade wasn't just cheating, she was a stranger, a shadow wearing Emily's face. I had evidence now, photos and texts, a trail of lies I could follow. But evidence isn't power unless you use it, and I was done waiting. Friday morning, I set the trap. Emily was in the kitchen, sipping tea, her auburn hair catching the light like nothing was wrong. I slid the manila envelope, the one from the mailbox, across the counter. Found this, I said, voice flat. Care to explain? Her eyes widened, just for a second, then narrowed. What is this, Dan? She flipped it open, saw the photos of her and Jonathan at the Laurel, and froze. The note, ask her about Chicago, fluttered to the floor. She didn't pick it up. Start talking, I said, leaning in. Jonathan. The hotel. Chicago. Mikey Russo. All of it. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that cut through the room. You've been busy, she said, setting her mug down. What do you think you know? I know you're not who you say you are, I shot back. I know about the warehouse, the cash, the gun. I know Mikey's dead, and you were there. So drop the act, Emily. Who are you? She stared at me, unblinking, then stood. You want the truth? Fine. But you won't like it. She crossed to the living room, pulled a bottle of bourbon from the cabinet, my bourbon, and poured 2 glasses. Sit. I didn't move. Talk. She sighed, downed her shot, and started. Jonathan's not my lover. He's my handler. I've been working with him for years, undercover, off the books. Not for the firm, Dan. For the feds. I blinked. The feds? You're a paralegal. No, she said, voice steady. I'm an agent. Recruited out of law school, before we met. The paralegal gig's a cover. I've been running ops, money laundering, drug rings, corruption. Jonathan's my point man. The Laurel? Dead drops. Chicago? Mikey Russo was a target, a dealer we flipped. He OD'd before we could pull him out. Bad luck, not murder. My head spun. You're saying you're FBI? And you never told me? Couldn't, she said, meeting my eyes. You were my anchor, Dan, my normal life. I needed that to stay sane. But yeah, I lied. Every day. The cash? The gun. I pressed. Seized assets, she said. We were moving them to a safe house. The blonde at the warehouse? Another agent, Claire. It's all part of the job. I laughed, harsh and hollow. So I'm the idiot husband, huh? Sitting here while you play spy. She flinched. I didn't want this for you. I tried to keep you out. Then who sent the photos? I snapped, pointing at the envelope. Who's watching us? Her face darkened. That's the problem. We don't know. Someone's on to me, someone inside. Jonathan thinks it's a leak. I think it's bigger. I paced, mind racing. FBI. Undercover. It fit. The secrecy, the burner phone, the polished lies. But it didn't erase the hurt, the years of deception. Why should I believe you? I asked. You've lied about everything. Because I'm done lying, she said, stepping closer. I'll prove it. Come with me tonight, meet Jonathan, see the operation. You want truth? It's yours. I didn't trust her, not fully, but I nodded. If this was a game, I'd play it to the end. That night, we drove to a diner off I-95, met Jonathan in a back booth. He was all business, showed me creds, files, photos of Emily in the field. She's the best we've got, he said. But she's compromised. That envelope? It's a warning. We're pulling her out. Pulling me out? Emily snapped. No. I'm close. Months of work on this ring. I can finish it. You're burned, Jonathan said. Whoever sent those photos knows too much. You're done. She argued, fierce, but I cut in. Who's the target? Who's she chasing? Jonathan hesitated, then slid a file across. Victor Callahan. Runs half the drugs in the Carolinas. Ruthless. If he's onto her, we're all in the crosshairs. Callahan. The name hit like a brick. I'd seen it, in her emails, buried in a case file I'd dismissed as routine. This wasn't just an affair or a side gig. It was war. We left the diner, plan set. Emily would go dark. I'd lay low. Jonathan would handle extraction. But the universe had other ideas. Halfway home, headlights flared behind us, too close, too fast. A black SUV rammed our rear, tires screeching. Emily cursed, floored it, but they kept coming. Callahan, she hissed, yanking the wheel. He found me. The chase was chaos, highway blurring, metal crunching. I gripped the dash, hard in my throat. She swerved off-road, into the woods, but the SUV followed. A gunshot cracked the night, our back window shattered. Get down, she yelled, pulling a pistol from her glove box. My wife, the spy, firing out the window like it was nothing. We lost them in the trees, engine smoking, but not before I saw the driver, tattooed neck, snakes curling up. Not Callahan. Mikey Russo. Alive. Grinning. Emily stopped the car, panting. That's impossible, she whispered. He's dead. I saw the body. Did you? I asked, voice shaking. Or did someone lie to you? She didn't answer. We ditched the Camry, hiked to a gas station, called Jonathan. He was frantic. Claire, the blonde agent, was missing. The safe house was hit. It's a setup, he said. Russo's alive. Callahan's playing us all. And then the final twist, the one I never saw coming. My phone buzzed. A text from Nate, my PI buddy. Found the leak. It's you, Dan. They tracked your searches, your calls. You led them to her. Attached, a photo of me at the Laurel, snapped by someone I'd never seen. I stared at it, blood draining from my face. My digging, my paranoia hadn't just exposed Emily. I'd handed her to Callahan. The envelope wasn't a taunt from her enemies. It was bait, and I'd swallowed it whole. Emily saw the screen, her eyes hardening. You, she whispered. All this time, it was you? I didn't know, I stammered. I was trying to save me, she cut in, voice ice. You killed me, Dan. She grabbed the phone, smashed it, and turned away. Jonathan arrived, pulled her into his car. Stay here, he barked at me. You've done enough. They drove off, leaving me in the dark, gas station lights flickering. I wasn't the hero or the victim. I was the fool, the crack in her mirror, the flaw in her plan. Emily wasn't just gone. She was dead to me, and I'd pulled the trigger. Days later, news broke, Callahan's ring dismantled, arrest made, no mention of Emily or Russo. She vanished, new identity, new life, like I'd never existed. I'm still here, in our empty house, staring at that shattered mirror. My name is Daniel Harper, and I lost everything not to her lies, but to mine.